Welcome back, and we're moving on to our first conversation of the day, which is on National University Commission and accreditation of courses in Nigerian universities. And right here in the studio with me, we have Professor Emmanuel Agbaeze. He's a fellow, Nigerian Institute of Management, and he's a business development expert. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on stage.
Yes, thank you. Now, let's start from, the beginning or the basics before we go deep into the conversation. First of all, NUC, what exactly is NUC's primary mandate when it comes to Nigerian tertiary education system?
That is a very simple one, but it will also be good if you look at the background to its establishment. You will recall that the university system in Nigeria was virtually non-existent for some time, until the rich men in Lagos were able to send their children overseas for education. When they started graduating and started getting back in Nigeria, there was this open protest for establishment of higher institutions in Nigeria, which led to the establishment of Yaba College of Education, and then the agitation continued. And at the point, what we now call the National Universities Commission was established in 1962 as an advisory agency in the Cabinet Office. At that point, its essence was to advise government on financing and possible development of education for national development. It followed on until about 1974, when it became a statutory body, with Professor Jibril Amini as the first executive secretary of that commission. However, like we ask, what then is the mandate? The primary mandate or mission of that commission is to regulate and coordinate development of universities in Nigeria with the aim of producing qualitative and quantitative graduates for national development.
Okay, and coming down to accreditation of courses. Now, this course accreditation, why is it so important in, as part of the education system in
you get into two levels of discussion: strategic issues and non-strategic issues. From the Nigerian national perspective, there is this need for holistic development and advancement of the academic curriculum for the university. Because we say this is a first degree, this is a degree from a Nigerian university, there will also be need to have a harmonized and standardized programs, where a degree from Ahmadu Bello will be equated with a degree from our almighty University of Nigeria, and that from Abia State University will be equated with that of ESUT, and all of them should be able to operate at the same level, because we are thinking about Nigerian degrees. And to have a qualitative education, have degrees classified in first class, second class, and the rest of them, there's a need to have a minimum standard, so that we can say one is not better than the other. And that you discover in terms of weighting. Wherever you get the first degree in Nigeria, is seen as the same, because there is a moderating body that is able to moderate the standard so that they be seen as equal and same.
Okay, so now, in order to get these courses accredited, what exactly are the core criteria that NUC uses to, accredit a course?
For a course to be accredited, or a department or university, there are basic requirements. And one will ask, what are these basic requirements? NUC technically looks at the staffing, the infrastructural development, the library, academic, admission requirements, courses offered. In fact, there are basically about 7 criteria they look at. And what they do in this area is to be sure that you have the enabling facilities that is capable and forming the substructure for operationalization of the programs. After establishing the structures, they also want to find out whether we have the library, the facilities. And because those facilities do not run on their own, they will also think of whether you have, including classrooms and the likes. And then you talk of the manpower, the academic, both teaching and non-teaching. And there are specific requirements before you can become a lecturer in Nigerian university. It used to be master's degree. At the moment, the university is moving on to using a PhD, doctorate degree, as a minimum requirement for you to teach in the university system. And because you need this, and you also look at your area of specialty and your capacity to deliver, including the leadership of the departments and programs. What is the essence of this? The entire essence is to stop unnecessary discriminations in terms of degrees in Nigeria. Like I said earlier, if I say I have a first degree from University of Nigeria, and then they're telling me he has a first degree from Enugu State University of Science and Technology, and a third one comes and says he has a first degree from Ahmadu Bello University, University of Lagos, and University of Ibadan, all of them should be seen as same. To be seen as same. The essence, and for you to achieve this, there's a need for harmonization, and that is where the course accreditation comes into play. How does it come into play? The NUC, which we call National Universities Commission, tries to have what they call, usually they used to have what they call BMAS, which is what they call BMAS. And what BMAS does, which is to establish the minimum academic requirement for portionization of the departments and faculties. From BMAS, they move on to CCMAS, which is what we have at the moment, and which is a new framework that is tailored toward making sure that all the universities accredited operate at about the same level. But now we say it's CCMAS, core course curriculum. And what it does is that about 70% of the courses offered in the Nigerian universities for similar courses will be the same across the board. And then makes a provision for about 30% for individual differences and core competencies. That is to say, all the universities will operate at a level of 70% equality at the courses level. But there will be peculiarities between me and you. And those peculiarities, it becomes area of freedom by the universities to introduce those things that make them different. In as much as we all say that they appear to be the same, but I also tell you, there's an element of competition among the universities to make a world of difference. And that is where the 30% comes into play. When somebody from University of tells you I'm half a PhD from University of Nigeria, there's something that makes him different. They appear to be the same. They appear to be apparently the same. But there must be something else that I want to say. Do you know I'm from University of Nigeria? And if you go digging into it, you see an element of difference may not be significant, but there's something that makes it tick. That's what that 30% does. But and of course, in the education system, if you have 70%, it's an A. So the basic thing, they operate at the same level, but there must be a little
difference,
significant to show that this is where we are.
Yes, and talking about the criteria, recently federal government announced that universities must score at least 70% in 4 key areas. Yes, to earn accreditation. So can you, break down what these 4 areas are and shed more light? Just explain to us.
You see, once you say that something is sweet, you must also tell us how sweet it is. And there are basic issues, critical issues you must look at. If you want to run an university, you must have a standard library. It's an engine house for information sharing, information exposition. And if you get into accreditation and fail in your library facilities, you can't get full accreditation. Because the universities, the libraries have to be standardized. And you will also recall that this is one of the things I also insist on. You must have a good library, functional library, and not just that you must have the books in the library. The books have to also be international books, local books, and they must also be current books to drive the various courses. Besides having a functional library, you also get into what they call the staff academic mix. A minimum of 75% of those teaching a particular program should have a PhD. PhD is research-based, both theoretical and research-based.
Yes. Because
you agree with me, you cannot give what you don't have. And if you fail in terms of staff strength, staff mix, you cannot get accreditation. And in looking at the staff strength, they look at the mix between professor, postdoctoral cadre, senior academics, that's senior lecturers, lecture ones, and the rest of them. The mix have to be in proper format. If you get out of that, you look at the non-teaching staff. After looking at non-teaching staff, you also look at what we call academic staff ratio. That's what we call students staff ratio. Because you can't get 100 students and subject them to teaching by one person. University will insist that you have about 25 or thereabout to one academic staff. Once the academic staff is properly, you have them, they move on to look at what they call the physical facilities. The library, the academic, physical facilities, including classroom, conveniences, must be put in proper shape and form. And again, which is also important, because you don't get people who are not qualified to the school. They also will look at the admission requirements. They want to be sure that the admission requirements, the class of people they admit to the university, are the same across Nigerian universities. And it's very depending upon the course. If you have students who are not qualified, then you can't get accreditation. Academic admission requirements, teaching staff, library, physical facilities. They are basically their core. You can think of running an university. And what NC does is to ensure that these basic requirements are put in place across universities in order to produce employable, qualitative and responsible students who will qualify in terms of both character and learning to be able to drive national development.
Okay. And what are the major challenges, or what would you say are the major challenges that Nigerian universities face when it comes to meeting up to these standards in order to get accredited?
Without Mr. Well, I'll tell you the truth. The body is willing. No, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. If you look at over 85% when has to go on strike, they will always border on facilities, university development, not issues that are personal to academics. No, they border on holistic issues that affect development of the university system and the nation. So at the moment, the core problem we face immense financing. Because we are competing in a global market. The products you get from Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, all of them compete in the same market with those we have in Nigeria. And you need to be properly tutored, properly educated, properly skilled to be able to fight in this international market. Fortunately for us, Nigerian graduates across the globe outperform most of those from outside. So we'll say we are doing very well. But that is not to say that there are no room for improvement. There are. Anywhere you get into and see the best of their brains, you'll be surprised that they are coming from Nigeria. And most of them come from people who have first degree from Nigeria. That tells you that our system is not failing. Instead, it's very reliable and competitive enough. However, the government needs to do more. They should stop playing pranks with academics. They will stop saying what they have not done. The problem with university system is that money you send to university system is not shareable. It's not the money you say I give 1 million, government will take 5. No. It is money that is monitored, that is spent exactly for the purpose they are meant for. And in most cases, one thing is said in the TV, in the radio, and another thing on the ground. Government should stop playing politics from university. And they should stop getting involved in university administration. University admission, universities are autonomous. They are semi-territorial grounds. They're independent entities, though in territorial grounds. It is not a place for politicking. It is a place for holistic human development of the mind and body. It's not the political arena. Let them leave the universities alone. In leaving the university alone, they should also fund the university completely, because there lies the soul of the nation.
So basically, the major issue or the major challenge is financing
and meddlesomeness, unnecessary politicking, meddling with internal university policies, internal university running. Is not for government. It should be left solely for academics who are properly trained for that purpose.
Okay. And speaking on the criteria, for universities, now we also see situations whereby some courses in some universities are not accredited, and you have students in those departments and they are still accepting new intakes. So what happens to we find such scenarios playing out in our universities? What is the NEC doing?
That's an act of illegality. In most, when you talk of accreditation, it's also classified. There's what we call full accreditation, in which case you operate your program for the next 5 years before you are revisited. You also have what we call interim accreditation. When it's interim, you are also given opportunity to operate for about 2 years or so before you are revisited. And you also have cases where you are university where a course is not accredited. And if it's completely not accredited, you cannot admit students. And you might find departments that have students for courses that are not accredited. Along the line, you see them finding a way to manage the students out of the department or move them to the departments that are accredited. But for an university or a department to admit and graduate students in courses not accredited is hardly the case.
But the thing is that most of these students don't even know that these courses are not accredited. So how can students be formally, notified, okay, that this course they are coming into is not accredited? Or if along the line, because sometimes they might have the courses might be accredited, but maybe in their third year or fourth year, it's time for another accreditation process and it's not. So how do they know,
Accreditation generally is not an in-house thing. It's not hidden. And a department cannot go through accreditation without the students knowing. Because in the process of the accreditation, not only that the program, the students are also involved. Because the team also interact with the students. Besides looking at their files, they also interact with them face to face and also watch lecturers teach them. And the results are also made public. So it's not possible for a student to say he's running his department that is not accredited and he will pretend he does not know. And the managers of the system, the head of department, that the dean, once a course is not accredited, they know they are in trouble. They know they're about to lose their job. You see them, they wake from their sleep and make sure that arrange for accreditation. They do, after accreditation, NUC team also points out the areas of weaknesses,
okay,
and things that needs to be done. And after a while, when they come back, the first thing they ask is the report of the previous accreditation to be able to see the observations in the past and also note whether those things have been put in place. But me and you know, if perchance you sleep down and you're on the ground, do you remain there? You make efforts to get up. If you lose accreditation, it's also opportunity for the departments also to also begin to see those things they ought to do that they have not done, and then put them in place, knowing that they will be parting the next day.
Okay, now let's look at the transparency when it comes to the accreditation process. How transparent would you say this process is, without bias or one form of bias or the other? How is it a fair accreditation process across all universities?
I will tell you this.
And objectivity as well when it comes to scoring in the areas that are important during the accreditation visits.
I'll tell the truth. The truth is that there will always be strategic and not strategic issues. There will always be things that matter and things that do not matter. When it comes to those things that matter, critical issues, they are objective. Photo texts are not involved. But you also know, if you know you are going to be examined, you make effort. You prepare. It's like expecting a visitor. You begin to sweep your house. You begin to put things in proper perspectives. The understanding is that once those things are done, you allow them to tarry. But you can get an extreme case where they are not sustained after accreditation because of possibility of non-sustenance. That gives room for re-accreditation. Because you can get accreditation today, but the next visit you do not. For instance, let's take University of Nigeria for instance. There was a time that the Faculty of Law lost accreditation. And students' intake dropped. By the time the next accreditation came on board, the University Senate, the University Administration, the government had to mobilize resources from everywhere to put the place together. If you go to university, Allah is one of the best. And if you go to the common ground, which we call the law school. You discover that in most cases, over 50% of the best students come from University of Nigeria. And if you get to a business administration, professional courses in business administration in University of Nigeria will produce the best across the globe. And if you look at the history of those who call, even the central bank governors, those who have done well, and strategic government position, private and non-private establishment, any university you go to, you don't see any good institution, you don't see a graduate from business administration from University of Nigeria. Then you need to ask questions. And if you go to universities itself, you discover that most of the head of departments come from University of Nigeria. They go out in search of them because they know they have something to bring to the table. As I speak to you, once I stop being useful to University of Nigeria, they will kick me out. It is your ability to generate value that keeps you there. It's a faceless thing. NUCI assessment is faceless because after all this, when it gets to the report, it's classified. You can even attend them, do all the photo tricks and rest of them, but when it gets to that report, you can think you are getting on. By the time the report comes out, you will be marveled that the truth has been told. And what you don't have it. Because it's important on us. After all, who does the accreditation? You have people from various universities, tested professors, who are also interested in development of the university system and development of Nigeria. Because if the university system fails, if you do not do well at that level, then the nation will crumble. Like I said earlier, the university system is not a trading unit. That there lies the soul of the society, and they must be protected with two hands, devoid of politics, external interference, devoid of bickering, but the nation must fund it properly because their lives are pride.
Yeah, and if a university feels that they have been unfairly rated or they've done so much and what NUC, the score NUC gave them is not up to what the effort they put in, is there room for an appeal? Can they appeal or something? You know.
What they simply do, like I told you that it's not something that stands and ends. It's like a journey. And the team that comes to university, usually with people who have no interest in university, because they're always careful to make sure that there's no conflict of interest. Because the report is classified and it does not come out immediately, you may not know. The heads of the department may not know. But even in course of what they call the exit interview, where the chairman of the team interact with the university administration, tells them where the goodnesses, the strengths and weaknesses, but the report itself won't come immediately. Let's go back to NUC. If for any, let me tell you, if for a reason you've not done well in exams, and you know there's going to be another exam, what do?
You wait.
And you also know that those who visited you today will not be the same set of people who will visit you tomorrow. Because carefully, the system, the NUC will always ensure that those who come to university are people who are not compromised, who have no conflict of interest, and who are matured enough to give a valid and reliable judgment. But even at that, if you still feel aggrieved, maybe I say I denied accreditation 1 year, you are repeated. And you see whether the report will be the same. If it is partial, after 2 years, you are repeated. If it is full, well, you go to bed and rejoice, knowing that you also be revisited after 5 years. So this thing is a continuous evaluation, continuous process. It doesn't make any room for any person to go to sleep. And there's no way. And what you find is usually a team of about 7, and 7 of them will give an independent verdict. And 7 of them, there won't be any room for 7 of them to collaborate wrongly. No. No. But what is possible, I will tell the truth, might be for people to go and borrow what they don't have.
Okay.
And pretend that they have it in order to pass accreditation. But a careful team will always catch them. Because after the accreditation, as they're about to leave, in most cases, they go back to the facilities in an informal manner to ascertain whether what they saw yesterday are still there, whether what they saw at the point of arrival are still there at the point of departure. The system is so, in terms of planning, it's perfect. In terms of execution, it's very good enough. But planning, perfect. Planning, very perfect. Implementation, very, very good. But there's always a room for improvement.
Exactly.
Nigerian systems need to improve. And our politicians need to leave us alone. Yes. And they also need to finance. You don't play politics with education. You don't play politics with the future of the nation. It's not buy-sell architecture. And those who teach must be allowed to pursue knowledge for its sake. And they must be allowed to do their job.
So in what ways are universities being politicized? Because you've mentioned this a couple of times. So how would you say the politicians are trying to make use of the universities for their own personal interest?
Who blows the pipe determines the tone. University governing councils shouldn't be a place for compensation of politicians. University governing councils should be a place for tested academics, retired and serving, who understand it. You have no business bringing politicians to be chairman, people who have not had sufficient education to be chairman of our councils. You have no business bringing military generals to be to superintendent of a university council. What do you understand about the Senate and the operationalization of the university policies? You can appoint a non-military man to go and superintend over a battalion of soldiers. For the universities, the council should be made up of serving and retired academicians. Or even if you have to bring people from the public sector, they should people who have sufficient education and experience and the zeal and interest in the development of the country. We are talking about the place where policies are made. We are talking about the people who produce those, who lead the nation. We are discussing the substructure for development and progress of the nation. It's not an area for politicking. It is like when you carefully move out self-interest, find the responsibility you get out of it, and carefully go out there and look for those who have what is said to run university.
But don't you think that the academicians themselves also encourage and, allow this interference of politicians into the academic space?
There could be conflict of interest among academics, no doubt. There could be a disagreement within a family, no doubt. But that does not give room for a non-family member who do not understand their family tradition, their family values, to mediate in the family business. There's what we call an elite conspiracy. The elites, like but most professors have belonged to that class, do not need to agree all the time. But they agree, but the disagreement among the elites in the university is also makes a room for brainstorming, for the best brains to come on board to be able to bring to the board the best policies, the best issues that make the university to move on. They could disagree about the university professors, yes, but that does not give room for somebody who does not understand the system to come into it. You understand?
Yeah.
And most of those agreements you might find border on policies, they border on strategic issues, they border on how to move the universities forward. There will always be different schools of thought, different philosophies, but at the end of the day, all of them are projected towards the same direction, or making the university a better place, reliable. Professors, the university belongs to the professors, and all they do is to make effort that the place stands out distinguished. That's where we are. That's the position of the university. Knowledge acquisition, character molding, and national development.
Okay, and well, as you know, the world is changing, and we are going into more digitization, and so is when going for accreditation, does NUC look or adapt in its criteria things like virtual programs, online learning environments, and other things that have to do with the recent innovations in digital technology?
What then is the university? The university is a hallmark where you play with knowledge. And what they do continuous research. If you talk about innovation in academics, digital learning, computerization, and online educations, that is where you find it in the university. It's not a closed system. What I mean by not being a closed, it's an open system that operates in an international market. And the students will produce complete globally. And artificial intelligence, online learning, computerization, for whatever you call it, where do they come from? Who are those that developed it? Where do they perfect it? Where is it practiced? It's in the university system. That is where you find it. And for us here, we are leaders in this area. It's not possible for people at a certain age. You cannot have physical contact all the time. People can get educated and get this requires knowledge, still in their home. And with a scheduled period, online learning is the key. And no lecturer can get out of it at the moment. You must move in line with development. In fact, the aim of the university moves in line with developments, with advancement in modernity. In fact, they canvas it, they practice it. They develop it, they canvas it, they practice it. And also encourage people outside to look into it. That's why we are there.
Okay, but would you say that our Nigerian university and education system, we're actually there when it comes to being tech savvy as opposed to our
I understand what you're saying.
Counterparts?
Where did they start? That is a question to ask. If you talk of most of the technological innovations, they have Nigerian background. When you talk of its practicability within the university system, that's where you find it. The difference is that we develop those in the business world practice the more, because there's always this interaction between the gown and the society, because the theories will profess the technological innovation will bring to place. It don't need to start and end within the university system. We do it for the outside world to take advantage of it for better development, for progressive advancement of the nation. You can't have an university graduate at the moment who is not computer friendly. It's a requirement. And we do it so that I can also do their job within the university and outside the university. People now attend conferences, stay in their homes, and those and give the lectures from the comfort of their homes. But there's always a need for once in a while for physical contact.
Exactly. And then looking at other people that have or that can influence, for instance, alumni associations and employers and civil societies. Now, do you think that they play a role when it comes to holding universities accountable to maintaining the standard that they're supposed to maintain in order to, produce students who are qualitative and quantitative?
There's something called tracer system. What the tracer system does is that at the end of the day, every university, every department have a record of those who graduated from the university. They're able to find out from time to time how they're faring in the industry. And this admin also have an eye on the university. They come together, question some of the things that happens in a place. They also help in the funding and development of the institutions. And the tracer system is also a criteria that NUC looks at when they walk into the university. How many people have you graduated? Where are they? What are they doing? How are they getting on with the society? Are they able to impact positively in line with their thoughts and philosophies of the university? The planning of NUC and the accreditation system is carefully developed and carefully implemented. And when I say that it's a perfect agreement, I'm not saying that there are no holes. Those holes are the things we said we should make effort to block. Because nothing is absolutely perfect. But in terms of planning, give it to us.
Okay, and do you think that the Nigerian government or the Nigerian system has adequately, equipped our universities, both financially and structurally?
I would say no. I said they have not. They know they have not. They know they have not. It is just that people in the place pursue knowledge for the sake of knowledge. You see, to be a professor in the University of Nigeria, not just in the University of Nigeria, in Nigeria all over, is a calling. You must have the discipline. If you rely on what happened with the government, you won't be there. But because it's a calling, because it's our duty, because it's a place to develop the substructure for our children, for the society, that's why we are there. The federal government and the state government and state governments have not done well in this area. In the funding, they have not done well. They've not done well. They've been striving, even though they will also attribute it for financial matters. But we also say, let them try to do a little more than they are doing. They are trying. The present governments are trying. They talk of earn allowances and rest of them. In most cases, they are announced. Market people will shout that the money has come, but we don't find them. But they must make effort consciously and intentionally visit the structures, the libraries, staff welfare, including digitalization of the institutions. Efforts have been made by government, good efforts. Let me say that they are trying, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough. Something greater than what they're doing needs to be done if they are sincere with the system.
And are there particular areas of the academic that they need to give more attention to at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, so what are those areas?
Take a walk to just walk into any of the what we call first generation universities. You discover that most of the buildings have very old buildings. You talk of just like that. You talk about the world moving towards computerization, moving into high tech. We have the manpower. When it comes to conferences, when it comes to infrastructure development, the government have not done well. Go to most, I'm not talking about private universities, I'm discussing state and federal universities. If you go into them, you will see clearly, in particular federal universities, federal universities, that most of them are living in the glories of the past. You hardly will find good buildings to credit to government. Debt fund, yes. Debt fund, yes, but it's still not sufficient. But for some state universities, if you come to Enugu State University, for instance, I know the governor is doing well. I know you can see some new projects. If you walk into the institute, you see some new projects which can clearly say this is government oriented. But if for most of the federal universities, and if you go to other state university, you might also find some government presence. But if you come to the first generation universities, you don't find good building, good infrastructure that can clearly say that this is government oriented.
But don't you think that the government should also put an eye to private universities as well?
Certainly they do. Debt fund also do. But you also understand the difference. The difference is clear. In Igbo tradition, man will tell you that a father carries his son and then holds the son of the concubine by the hand. So the sole responsibility of the federal government is the federal universities. But they have an oversight function over the state and private universities. If you forgo that belongs to you and begin to pursue oversight functions, will it be said that you are doing the right things? No. It is our responsibility to take care of the federal university and exercise an oversight function over the state and the private universities.
Okay, and just before we let you go, now, if you were given a scorecard to, how many Nigerian universities would you say meet that 70% standard of, the NUC criteria for accreditation?
How many?
How would you rate our universities now and, where they are? Do they meet, most of our universities, do they meet this standard of accreditation?
Those that are on operation do. First of all, let me tell you, they will not tell you. The universities that do not pass accreditation don't function. They gradually fizzle away. Some of them transfer their students to other universities. But if you're tired with the state, will tell you that you can get into School of Medicine, you discover that one particular university is trying to help their students graduate in another university. For the university, NUC, perfect. In fact, I keep wondering what the university system would have would be looking like if not for NUC. And Tedford, perfect too. We are doing well. Let me also shock, like I said before. There's no university in the world you get into, you don't find Nigerian university. You don't find graduate from University of Nigeria. For the graduate from, when I say universities, when I say Nigerian universities, I'm talking in terms of holistic arrangement. Nigerian universities are doing very well. The best of the medical doctors all over the world come from Nigeria. The best of the historians come from Nigeria. The best of the business experts, including Otto, come from Nigeria. It's a world record. And when people try to play down the performance of the universities in Nigeria, it is not true. We are doing very, very well. However, there's a room for improvement because it is a journey.
Yes.
And it's ongoing.
There is always room for improvement.
Yeah, certainly.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Professor Emmanuel Agbaeze, for this wonderful conversation. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Professor Emmanuel Agbaeze is a fellow Nigerian Institute of Management and a business development expert.
See Nature TV. News in your pocket.